In late October 1981, a Soviet submarine ran aground in a place no Soviet submarine was ever supposed to be, inside a restricted Swedish naval anchorage, meters from where the Swedish fleet docked its most sensitive warships. It wasn't a mechanical failure. It wasn't a navigation error, no matter what Moscow claimed for the next 10 days. The boat was carrying nuclear torpedoes on a spy mission, and when it hit the rocks, it ignited one of the tensest standoffs of the entire Cold War. Sweden called it a provocation. The Soviets called it an accident. The truth was worse than both. By the end of this video, you'll understand how a single submarine, stranded in shallow water, nearly started a war between two nations that were both trying very hard to avoid one. Here's the context the official reports left out. By 1981, Sweden had no intention of joining NATO, but it was quietly one of the West's most valuable listening posts. Its coastline bristled with sophisticated electronic intelligence stations, and its navy spent years tracking Soviet submarines slipping through the Baltic's shallow, treacherous waters. To Moscow, that was a problem. Every Swedish antenna was a window into Soviet naval movements, and every Soviet submarine that could map those waters was worth more than its weight in gold. So the Soviet Baltic Fleet maintained a quiet, deniable operation, sending submarines into Swedish territorial waters to map approaches, test defenses, and listen. U-137, a diesel-electric whiskey-class boat, was one of those boats on one of those missions. She was old. She was slow. She was absolutely not supposed to be where she ended up. Let me explain why a supposedly competent navy would send an aging boat on such a sensitive job. The Whiskey class was designed in the late 1940s, based on German wartime engineering, and by 1981 it was ancient. It ran on batteries underwater and had to surface to recharge, which meant it was at its most exposed exactly when it needed to be quiet. That's a terrible profile for a spy. But it had one advantage: it was small, common, and forgettable. In the crowded Baltic, a Whiskey-class sail poking above the waves could be anyone's. The Soviets bet that Sweden wouldn't dare escalate a confrontation over a harmless old boat. Here's the thing about that bet. They were about to lose it. Badly. The night of October 27, 1981, U-137 was running through the Gåsefjärden Channel, a narrow, rock-lined passage that leads straight toward the Swedish naval base at Karlskrona, one of the most restricted military areas in the country. To be here, the submarine had to pass several listening stations and patrols. Either her navigation was catastrophically broken, or she knew exactly where she was going. And then, just after midnight, the boat shuddered to a violent stop. She had run hard aground on a rocky shoal, bow up, stranded in shallow water, in full view of the Swedish base. Within hours, Swedish patrol boats were surrounding her. The crew, caught mid-mission, scrambled to the deck, and the world held its breath because nobody on that Swedish shore knew whether the boat was carrying anything nuclear. What happened next turned a navigation blunder into an international crisis. Sweden demanded to board and interrogate the crew. The Soviets refused and sent a small fleet of warships steaming toward the scene. Swedish fighter jets scrambled. The Navy was placed on alert. For days, the submarine sat stuck on the rocks, its crew refusing to leave, while a Soviet rescue flotilla threatened to force its way through. At one point, the Soviet captain fired shots. Sweden's government, already furious, called it an attack. Moscow called it a warning. The tension was so thick that the Swedish Prime Minister publicly threatened to hold the submarine and its crew hostage until Moscow explained itself. This was no longer a technical incident. It was a hostage standoff between a NATO-adjacent nation and the Soviet Union over a stranded submarine with a crew that knew too much. And here's the cruel irony, the part that made the whole affair radioactive. When Sweden finally forced an interrogation, the crew's nervous answers collapsed. The captain, a man the Swedes eventually got to speak with, confessed that the submarine was carrying nuclear-tipped torpedoes. A Soviet spy submarine, stranded inside a Western naval base with nuclear weapons on board. It was, in every possible way, the worst-case scenario Moscow had spent the whole Cold War trying to avoid. Sweden was furious and horrified. The Soviets, humiliated, spun the story as a bungled navigation error, a lie so obviously convenient that nobody in the West believed it. The submarine had done exactly what a spy submarine is designed to do: slip into hostile waters unnoticed. And it had turned that entire capability into a geopolitical catastrophe in the most public way imaginable. After 10 days of standoff, the deadlock broke. Sweden, having extracted the confession it needed and made its point to the world, allowed a Soviet tug to refloat the stranded submarine. U-137 was escorted out of Swedish waters under the watchful guns of the Swedish Navy, its nuclear cargo intact, its mission a complete and total disaster. But the story didn't end with the boat sailing away. The incident, forever nicknamed Whiskey on the Rocks, changed how the Baltic was policed for a generation. Sweden hardened its naval defenses, sharpened its submarine hunting doctrine, and its suspicion of Soviet underwater intrusions became a defining obsession of its defense policy for the next decade. Moscow, humiliated, quietly withdrew its most ambitious Baltic submarine operations. One stranded submarine had, at enormous diplomatic cost, done more to expose Soviet intentions than 100 listening stations ever could. So what's the lesson buried in the shallows of Gåsefjärden? It's the same uncomfortable truth your engineering stories keep circling back to. A weapon system, or here, a whole intelligence operation, can be executed with textbook precision and still collapse the moment it collides with the messy, unforgiving real world. U-137 did her job perfectly. She got into a hostile naval base undetected. And that success was precisely what turned her into a disaster. The ocean, and the politics above it, don't care how clever your plan was. They only care what happens when the plan goes wrong. Sometimes the most dangerous thing a spy submarine can do is not get caught. It's get stuck in the one place she was never supposed to be, with the one cargo that could start a war. If you want more deep dives into the hidden trade-offs and strange disasters behind the Cold War's most extreme machines, subscribe. And here's a question for the comments. What do you think is worse for a spy, getting caught or getting stuck? Let me know. I'll see you in the next one.